Officially welcome everybody to ISA Presents, a conversation with our fabulous TV writers, Shaina Fewell and Elaine Loh. We are, all the people you see on the screen right now are ISA staff members. So first of all, we're just gonna go around and introduce everybody, and then they are going to go off a video so that we can just pull up Elaine and Shaina.
Hi, I'm Molly. I'm the Director of Operations for the ISA. I oversee all of the operations, the staff, run the events, sponsorships, partnerships, lots of goodies. I just want to say real quick, thank you to all of you. This is amazing that there are 200 plus people on this call right now. It's really incredible. We had no idea what kind of response we were going to get on the first one. This is now the third that we've done in the course of just the last couple of weeks. It's really apparent that this is a time when we all need to come together, support each other, feel connected to each other, and be a part of this community that we are all a part of. And so thank you. This is a really hard time for a lot of people, and definitely a time of crazy amount of change. I think it's really important to hold gratitude high on our priority list right now. And so I'm grateful for this forum and for all of you being here and for my team.
Hi guys, I am the marketing and social media manager. So obviously I do all things social and marketing. If you guys do not follow us online, please go ahead and follow us at Network ISA. I'll put it in the chat so you guys can see. I'm doing a lot of different giveaways and contests right now. So if you guys want to submit to screenplay contests and it's a little hard right now, we completely understand. So we want to be there for you. So just be sure to follow us so you can get in on that action. And just echoing what Molly said, I just want to say thank you so much, you guys. This online community continues to grow, and it's so fun to be a part of. And I don't want to take up any more time, but just thank you and enjoy.
I'm our creative director. I handle all of our branding, graphics, and website. Feels really great to be here today, and seeing all of the action in the chat is just really inspiring.
I do all the video editing and shooting, so if you are following on YouTube and checking out our pro tips and tricks, I thank you for that. And I also get to do a lot of the podcast editing and some of the podcast interviews, and I will mention again, and this was inspiring for me this week, I was talking with the Rockaverty Writers Retreat, which we talked about what they do, but we also talked about all of their upcoming events, which are later in the year and through the fall and into next year. And in addition to it being just a great thing, it was exciting to actually be thinking about getting out and exploring the world again, and that there is going to be a time after this that's going to be full of wonderfulness. So yeah, so that's my positive thought of the day. Thank you all for joining.
Hi everyone, I'm Jaron. I'm the creative executive. I help find the content and scripts that we push out to production co's and managers and all that stuff, and I find that via all our platforms, contests, writing gigs, development evaluations, and I help Felicity Wren run the development slate. Felicity is our director of development and my best friend. And I just want to add, we are looking for content. People are still looking for stuff. If you're writing something amazing and you want to push it out, please submit to us or sign up for ISA Connect, because we are looking forward to reading your stuff. So be well, everyone, and enjoy the panel.
I'm Felicity Wren. I'm the Director of Development with the ISA. I've been with the company for 6 years. I love stories. Stories are my jam. I like reading stories. I like hearing about your stories. Please do be part of this amazing community together. I think together, telling our stories, we can change the world. So enjoy.
Welcome to this event. This is really exciting, and we're, like Molly had mentioned about the community, that's a big aspect of what we do. We're all about connecting to writers all around the world. We have people from everywhere, which is so exciting. And you know, during this time where a lot of people are pressing everybody to write, spend your time writing, I just want to stress to be careful about that. Like, you should write if it's a cathartic experience for you, but take time to be with your family, and to, you know, we've given up a lot here, and we're grieving in all sorts of different ways, but don't repress that. If you can use it in your writing, great. Even if you write to like I said, for a cathartic experience, to just get it out for you, do that without anyone ever having to read your work. Use that, or, you know, other forms of art. if it's painting or just taking long walks with, somebody who you're living with, your dog. That's why I spend a lot of time walking to my dog, just to use it as a meditative experience so that I don't let all of what's going on in the world build up inside of me. And then when I do work on my art, I'm not carrying in all the pain of what I've been experiencing in the last few month or so. I'm kind of letting it come out a little bit in a pure way, I think. So we hear a lot of this, right, use this time, but don't put that much pressure on yourself. We've got time. Please share it with, it's great that everybody's here, right? And we're sharing this time together. I think it's an important part of all that our community represents. And so I'm excited about the future. I'm excited that you're here. I'm especially excited about these two guests. This is one of the, this one in particular, it's just gonna be great to hear where we're headed, or where you as a writer, other writers are headed. So I'll just pass it on to back to Shaina to let it go. But remember, there's all sorts of resources on our site that are here to support you, and that's what we're all about, in addition to the community aspect. So please keep popping on the site, and hit us up at support@network.isa if you need us for anything.
I would like to introduce our first guest is Shaina Fewell. She is currently a writer and supervising producer on Outlander. Woo! Applause. I wish I had like an applause thing, because it's only my own applause. She also has written on One Tree Hill and The Client List, starring Jennifer Love Hewitt, and also Guilt on Freeform. Shaina is also my very old and dear friend, so that is amazing. And then our second guest is Miss Elaine Loh. Elaine is currently a writer on the new revamped HBOMax Gossip Girl that's happening. I saw some like great casting spoilers that you, not spoilers, little tidbits that you posted. She is also on the ISA Top 25 Writers to Watch of 2020. And man, I just want to dive in with you guys, because I don't want to give too much away, Elaine, about kind of how you got to where you're at, and Shaina, how you got to where you're at. But first, starting off, I want to do a couple icebreaker questions for you guys, just to get things loose. For both of you, Shaina, you can answer first, and then Elaine. What are your favorite shows or movies right now? And you get bonus points if something is like a guilty pleasure.
Okay. I definitely say like appointment TV for me is Homeland. I'm really into Homeland. And I've been watching Better Call Saul, which is, it can be a little slow sometimes, but I enjoy it. It's sort of like hanging with Breaking Bad when they're gone.
Right.
Guilty pleasure. This isn't really a guilty, well, I guess it's a guilty pleasure, but when I just don't want to think at all, this is really embarrassing. I watch Family Feud.
Nice.
That's my turn my brain off, not think about anything, let everything go thing.
Right. Well, I watch like Real Housewives of whatever to do that.
We watched the end of Bachelor, my husband and I, and he was like, wait, what is this? Wait, I don't understand. He's in love with 3 people? I don't understand. I was like, we're not going to go here. We're not going to.
Right. Don't go down that rabbit hole. Elaine, what about you?
I've been watching all sorts of things that I don't normally watch, because of like the times right now. So I've been watching kind of feel good family movies. So I just watched the second Jumanji, like the new second Jumanji.
Right.
It's hilarious. The first one is so funny too. And like, I didn't expect it to necessarily be, but I loved it. I also watched The Lion King, like the new Lion King. I feel like I have to specify all of it as like the new one. And it's been like somehow comforting to watch these things. And then I always go back to my old favorites of like Grey's Anatomy. Haven't missed an episode in, I don't know, what is it, 16 years or something like that. And my comfort show is SVU. I don't know why, it's kind of dark and sad, but also I watch it all the time still. So that's what I've been doing lately.
What do you guys, what dream show out of any show ever, made, current or one that's already gone? What's like your dream writing job?
My dream writing job was Breaking Bad. everything I've heard about that Vince Gilligan, just sort of like the way he ran the room, the writing environment, and sort of like how collective everybody worked together. And the main thing I just love about Breaking Bad that just kind of blew my mind from the very beginning is how visual the storytelling is. Because you look at scripts on a bunch of different shows, and like the first show I wrote on One Tree Hill, if you had more than 3 action lines, it would be like, wait, hold on, we got to get back to dialogue, because this is television. It's all about dialogue. But on Breaking Bad, they'll have pages of action because they tell so much of their story with visuals, and they can, you know, with televisions being what they are now, television obviously is very different, but I love the visual storytelling of Breaking Bad. I'd love to sort of dive into Vince Gilligan's brain and hear more about that.
Maybe someday, right? On his next thing.
Yeah.
Elaine, what about you?
Probably my dream show to write on is one that's unfortunately already long over, but is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I think, you know, especially when it was on, we didn't have a lot of kick-ass female lead shows, and thank God we have more of them now, but I can't even imagine being part of that and kind of being at the forefront of having a character like that. Not to mention, I love Buffy because it's dramatic, but it's also funny and poignant, and I would love to be on a show that is able to hit all of those buttons, you know?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of mine would be Buffy too. It was just like, for me, it was just changed the whole scene for me. Okay, and then last icebreaker question. What movie or show or series do you watch or have seen that literally makes you go like, I'm not worthy. I quit writing. I'm never going to be as good as this. For me, and I'm going to nerd myself right now, but for me, it was Battlestar Galactica, because I would watch certain episodes and I would just be like, I'm done. Like I you know, and Ronald D. Moore, like just blew my mind. So what about you, Shaina?
Well, Battlestar is definitely up there. But I would say there was, and I keep going back to Breaking Bad, but it's just what it is. I was watching an episode of Breaking Bad. I remember I was trying to write a pilot. I was locked in my apartment, and I had been there for like a week, and I was trying to write this pilot, and I was struggling with different storylines. And then I was watching Breaking Bad in between to sort of like reward myself for getting through a scene or whatever. And there was just a moment where I literally threw my remote and like walked out of my apartment. I was like, I'll never be able to accomplish that. And then I walked outside, and I didn't even get down the hall before I was like, oh, I got to see what happens next. And then I came back in and turned it back on.
Right.
But also I had that experience with Fleabag this past year as well.
Totally.
Where
Agreed.
it was just like that honesty and truth that she just laid out so fearlessly was just so cool.
What about you, Elaine?
I'm totally on board with Fleabag as just one that I'm like, how do you do that? And I have 2 other ones that are super, super different in tone. One is Dead to Me. I thought that was just like a brilliantly crafted show. Again, it's like, it's so sad. It's about a woman whose husband is dead, but it's so funny. And I thought the way that like the mystery of it kind of went episode to episode, like I rarely leave a show episode where I'm like, I need to watch this next one. I'm not a huge binger. I mean, like 3 maybe in a row is my max, but with Dead to Me, I think I watched it all in a day and a half. And then my other one is The OA. Like, what a weird show, and so cool that one I was just like, how did they even come up with this? I felt like they must have been on a lot of drugs, but maybe not. Maybe they're just like creative geniuses.
Okay, so let's dive into the respective shows that you're on. Can you guys talk about, and this time we'll start with Elaine on this one. Can you just talk about the Gossip Girl writer's room, what it looks like maybe, you know, for you stepping in, this was your first writer's room, correct? Stepping in and just kind of describe that for us, what it was, what's it like in there?
I feel very fortunate that my first writer's room was like a dream job. I had read various articles and things to try to, and talk to people and try to prepare. But most of the preparation, at least that I came across, felt like, be careful. Like, it's gonna be scary and terrible. And my showrunner was amazing. My co-writers were amazing. I felt very like supported in the room. So I'll tell you a little bit about like what we did, just because I had no idea really what to expect going into a room. Like I brought my computer with me, and everyone was like, you don't bring your computer in the room. And I was like, well, what do you do? Like, because I just thought, like, you write, so I need to write stuff down and like keep track of stuff. But that's what the writer's assistant is for. So just so you know, so you don't embarrass yourself when you go into your first room, like you don't need to bring that computer. But the way that it worked is, you know, we had 10 people and the writer's assistant, and at first, because we were a new show, and only the pilot had been written by the showrunner, we had a lot to create and make, as opposed to like an ongoing show and joining into that. So we first worked on a lot of character stuff, and then we broke like an overall big season-long story for the characters, and then we would go episode by episode to break the story. And really what that entails is just kind of like, okay, if we're going from, you know, A to Z, what's the midpoint, what's like L or M, and then kind of, and just filling in things like that. And what I found for my room, at least, and it might be different given different showrunners, but my showrunner was very, like I said, he was very supportive and wanted us to learn and participate. And so he wanted us to pitch. I've seen articles where people said, like, nobody expects anything of staff writers. If you can have like one good idea a day, or like two, like that's all anyone wants. But my showrunner was like, no, please, like you're here for a reason. You guys are all writers. It doesn't matter your level. And so that really helped me to be able to pitch. And something that I noticed people would do often is be like, okay, it's not this, but how about that? Like, you know, so that you're saying, like, I know this isn't like the end idea, but this is something to get started with. And so that was really kind of eye-opening to me to go, okay, you don't have to have the perfect idea, but maybe if you can start to articulate one, then other people can jump in and work together.
I know right now you're on Outlander, but you've done a couple other shows. Are they all similar? Are they different?
I would say that every room I've been in has been very different styles. It all really depends on the showrunner and sort of like the number two in the room. It depends on where your show is filming. Like the first show I was on, we shot in North Carolina. One Tree Hill shot in North Carolina, but we were writing in LA. So often the showrunner would be there and there'd be a number two in the room running it. And so everyone has a different style and how they do things. And that will often be, I mean, that show had been on for years. It went on for 9 seasons. And so it was kind of like a machine by the time I got there. And so we were very like, you do one outline, you wait for that to get approved. You do one script, you wait for that to get approved before you really start breaking the next episode. The next show I was on was like, you do 4 episodes at a time, and you really wouldn't break very much. You would just sort of like do the basic beats, and then all of the writers would sort of go off and write their outlines and then turn them all in. And then there'd always be domino effect where we had to sort of clean them up before we send them out. Outlander has been, it really depends. I mean, the problem with Outlander is we shoot in Scotland. And so much of what we have to do is we write our scripts way ahead of time, way more than on any of the other shows I've been on, in that, or at least we start to get down story areas, because almost every episode is like little movies. Like we're not really using the same sets that I've had the privilege to do on other shows. We have a few now, but it all depends. Like sometimes you're creating a brand new set or design for each episode. So the production design in Scotland has to start months ahead of time. So that changes the writer's room process quite a bit. And also it's based on a book, which is the first show I've done where it's based on a book series, which is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Diana's books, but like they can be up to like 1,400 pages. And we've been doing sort of a book a season. So it's like 1,400 pages of jam-packed with different story and moments and things that you love and you want to try to make sure that you can fit into the season, but it's really hard to get all that in. So that room really gets dominated by, okay, how do we, like when that room starts, you pretty much start talking about the book beats and what are the sort of tent poles of the book and how can you divide that stuff up into its own individual episode, because you can't just sort of like start with the book and go. You have to sort of find ways to tell episode stories within it. So each show presents its own challenge. And I think for me, I remember when I first started, I was very much like, okay, how does this go? And I need to just sort of like figure it out and then just be ready for it. And then I quickly learned there are no rules. Everyone does things differently. When when each of you become showrunners, you're going to do things differently, because you have to sort of, storytelling and creative process is just different for everyone. And it's interesting to see what works and what doesn't work. And hopefully, you know, you learn along the way and just sort of like find what works within each room for you and that you can dominate. I remember when I first started my first week, I remember pitching some ideas and like literally hearing crickets and just going, oh, and going home at night and just being like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm never going to succeed in this. And just really, really beating myself up. And then the next week I realized, okay, I was pitching some ideas that may work from a story point of view, but it wasn't the right tone for that show. So what's so key is your story instincts may be something totally different on its own, but you really have to make sure that you're getting the tone of the show. So it took me a few weeks to get my ideas in the tone of that show and what stories make sense for that show. And you hope that you know that ahead of time, but some our shows are new and you have to figure it out as you go. I don't know, that was a long rambling answer to that.
No, that was great. For you guys, what was the process for you starting out, and how did you get in to your first writing TV series, writer's room job?
I had a very untraditional route into the writer's world. I actually created a television show with a friend of mine, and it was an unscripted show where we traveled around the world, meeting our friends through MySpace, which is just so random. But before that, I was sort of, you know, going down the indie film route, and that was what I thought I was going to do. I wanted to direct music videos, and then we ended up selling this show, which was just sort of crazy. And we basically reached out to anybody we knew in the industry on the television end to learn how to sort of tell a television show. And obviously scripted and unscripted are very different, but you learned a little bit more about the machine, and that was pretty addictive to be like, oh, when you're writing an indie film or you're working in the indie world, especially, that stuff can last for years and years and years. And television, once that train gets going, you better keep moving. And I kind of got addicted to that. But so we through that process, we knew the showrunner from One Tree Hill, and we kept sending him samples until finally he was like, okay, I think you guys might be ready. And it wasn't necessarily just the sample. It was also on that show that I created, I found bands. So I went all over the world looking for bands to introduce to America. That was sort of the idea. And so on that show, on One Tree Hill, there was a character who started an indie record label, and it was easier to sell me as a starting writer to the network as somebody who sort of lived a little bit like that character. So I knew her voice, and I could add something to the writer's room. So hopefully, like you were saying, as a staff writer, you're not always expected to, they're not expecting you to be able to run the show. So it's really a learning position in a lot of different shows. And so they were able to sell me in that my expertise, or my experience, not expertise. I'm definitely not a music expert, but my experience in the music world could bring some authenticity to the show. And I think that is so key when it comes to getting that first gig. It's sort of like, what is that sales pitch? Like, as much as we all love, like, I love writing sci-fi. If I could have started off anywhere, it would have been in the sci-fi world, but I don't have that sci-fi background. That was the sales pitch to get me in. Now, finally, I'm on Outlander, which is a sci-fi show, but it was a very long road to get here, but it was, all of the storytelling is amazing to sort of like get you to the point where you are. I don't know. Did that make sense?
Yeah. So it's just as much about your writing as it is about who you are and what sort of background and experience you have.
Especially in television, because a lot of what you're doing every day is sitting in these rooms with people, and sort of who you are as a person. Really, like, I think a lot of people, when you're, a lot of writers are introverts and they sort of keep to themselves or whatever. And when you're writing screenplays, that's one thing, but to be in a writer's room, there is definitely a communal experience, and being able to sort of bring different expertise to different parts of the show can really help your odds of getting on the show.
Awesome. That's good advice. Elaine, what about you? I know you had your route is unique to you.
Yeah, I totally echo what Shaina said about getting the first job, but I'll talk about getting to the opportunity to even get the first job, which was very different from what Shaina went through. I probably had maybe like slightly a more traditional route of follow the pipeline. That's, someone told me that, like, there is an established pipeline for getting new writers in. And so you can try to make your own, or you can try to get into that pipeline, and it worked for me. So what I did was, well, first of all, my background is that I was an actor for a really long time, and I've been on a number of shows, and I was acting enough to like keep me in the business, but not acting enough to keep me satisfied, either creatively or financially. And so people had been saying like, you got to make your own content like forever. And I was like, no, I'm an actor. And then finally one day I was like, okay, maybe I will. And so I started with short stuff, you know, just like 3 pages, and I started producing those little shorts and stuff like that. And really though, at the point when I decided to be a writer as opposed to be an actor, what I did was I started submitting to all the various screenwriting competitions, and I wanted to just see how I stacked up. And I know that those things are still, you know, they're subjective. There's someone on the other end reading. So who, you know, I didn't agree with everyone, and I got some feedback that I certainly didn't agree with, but I at least like could kind of see, oh, I placed in this, or, you know, like what kind of, where my writing was going. And I did this for several scripts. And the ISA is a big part of my origin story. Like, you guys were the ones who found me in terms of the competition that I won, which was really exciting, was Table Read My Screenplay. And then from there, you know, you put me on the 25 screenwriters to watch list, and just kind of the more that someone believes in you, the more maybe you can believe in yourself. And I would like to say that it's all self-motivated, but like sometimes you need a little validation and someone to highlight you. And so you guys like kind of helped raise my profile a little bit. And so from there, you know, I continued this path, and I ended up hiring a consultant actually to work with, because I knew that I was going to continue to apply to the network programs, which I had done previously, did not get in. And the consultant I worked with, her name was Carol Kirshner, and she helped me craft a really great application for the programs. So then I got into the HBO Writers Program. I also got into the CBS Writers Program. I didn't end up doing it because while I was in the HBO Writers Program, my manager reached out to Paradigm, which is, you know, 5th biggest agency for writers, and they agreed to read me and took me on, and like from there it was gangbusters. So a lot of it felt like the, you know, the saying where like luck is opportunity meets preparation, or something like that. I might be butchering it, yeah. But that's what it felt like. That I was having so much good luck, but it's because I had kept putting in the work. And my manager always encouraged me. He goes, because I was like, let's find an agent, let's do this, let's do that. And he was like, why don't you just focus on the writing and we'll let them come to us. And I had a very hard time believing that like someone would come, you know, but it was true. And what ended up happening was the script that I wrote that kind of got the most notice was a script about my life. And the whole time I was acting, like I said, I didn't make enough money, so I was tutoring. And so I wrote a script called Schooling the Rich, which was about tutoring the elite kids in Los Angeles and kind of the craziness that entails. And that one got me the notice. And when I met with the showrunner for Gossip Girl, it was a perfect fit of, you know, like what Shaina was saying, that she had that experience. I had experience with the kind of kids that we would be writing about on Gossip Girl. And so it was a good match personally, and it was also a good match tonally.
So what you guys are saying are go find some bands and tutor some kids, and then you'll get in the writer's room.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's so funny, like your life experience matters. And some people I've talked to are like, my life is so boring though. Like, I don't have anything. If you would ask me like to write a script about tutoring, that sounds like the most boring thing possible, you know? But people are interested in that because that brings an authenticity to this world, whatever it is. And you might not even know that people are looking for your story, but if you can find a way to tell your story in a dramatic and exciting way, I know that, I mean, it's not easy, but it's possible, you know? And I think it's important, particularly at the beginning, so that people can go like, ooh, I want to use you. I want to use your experience in this show that I have, you know?
Right. Jim S. Hello, how are you?
At one time, the way to break into TV writing, and Elaine, you were kind of talking about this in terms of the pipeline, was to write a spec episode script. Is that still the way to break in? And more important, how do you select a show to use? I mean, in the day, it was like, you know, you do a Friends script or you do a Frasier script or that sort of thing. But with so much content out there, how do you decide and figure out what would be a good show to use for that spec script?
That's a great question. For me, I utterly resisted writing a spec script because I thought it would be harder than writing my own. And I actually found once I did it, it was the exact opposite because all the characters are established and everything. So, and I don't think a lot of showrunners read spec scripts as much. I do still meet some that think it's important, but for the most part, they're reading original. But if you want to get into most of the programs, you need an original and a spec. So I just chose, the one I did was Killing Eve because I was obsessed with the show and it also felt tonally right for my pilot School in the Rich that I referenced. It was kind of in the same vein of like a soapy drama, you know? So that's how I went about choosing. I've heard many different things. I'm sure there are probably like tons of articles online you can Google too, in terms of choosing one, but that you want something current, but that, you know, it's not so current and new that it's going to go off the air, like if it fails, you know, something within the first 2 seasons. And you don't have to worry about like, will everyone have seen this? Because there's absolutely no way that everyone will have seen it because there, like you said, there are so many other shows out there right now.
My experience, and when I first started out, no one would read spec scripts anymore. And so that was quite a while ago. And so you had to write your own original stuff. And I've actually never been asked for a spec script when it comes to getting a job. The only thing that people have ever wanted to read is my original stuff. And so I don't know, maybe if you were starting out now, maybe I feel like what I've heard is that there's a wave that goes back and forth between people reading specs or not reading specs, or it's like whatever is the fad at the time. And I actually don't know what it is for starting out, but I know now at my level, at least, no one wants to read a spec. They just want to read original stuff.
So you mean by spec, because sometimes when we're writing features and stuff, spec means you're writing it with no, you know, no contract or deal or job. But in TV, spec means you're taking a current show, correct? Or and writing an episode of that show.
Exactly. Which is, you know, like Elaine was saying, a lot of that groundwork is laid out for you. You know who the characters are. I always thought that made so much more sense for getting a TV job because you're showing that you can actually do someone else's voice as opposed to just your original voice. But, you know, people like to read original stuff.
Hello, Mary Lynn.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Amazing. Okay, I have a bunch of questions, so I'm trying to pick one to be polite. Thank you for being here. This has been awesome. You talk about it, what it's like, especially when you first started out and you're pitching in the room. Do you have a bunch of ideas that go through your head and you're filtering through them? Do you just spit them out in hopes that something is good or that it might spark an idea in someone else? And yeah, just go through that process with us.
It's been different depending on sort of like where in the beginning of my career, I kept a notebook with me. And if I had an idea, I would like write down something to remind myself if somebody else was talking, just because otherwise the ideas can kind of go. And I'd always just sort of like sit with it for a moment before I'd throw it out. And I was pretty picky about which ones I shared because you just don't want to be totally firing them off. It's nice to think, especially on Outlander, there are times in the room where we're all very quiet because we're all thinking. And I think when you first start out, you feel like, oh, quiet means that we got to fill that space and we just got to like come up with some kind of idea. And it's totally fine to sit in a writer's room, depending on the showrunner, and really think through things and then like only really share the ideas that you really believe in. And often you can share, like I think Elaine was saying this earlier, it's like you can start an idea. You're sort of like, well, I think, what if this character did something like this? And then the room gets together and then you start building, oh, if they did that, they could do this and they could do that. And then it can sort of fall back into this other story. So if there's something that you're inspired by, it's good to share it because often it'll be built into something that could turn out to be a really great storyline.
Yeah, I echo that. You know, I mentioned my showrunner was very supportive of us pitching, but still, like, yeah, you don't want to just pitch any idea. You want to think about it. So we also had those moments of silence and kind of thinking and figuring stuff out. And when I started, someone gave me the advice to come into the room with some ideas already on like the first day, and just have a notebook of stuff that way you can kind of like just be ready, you know, and be prepared. And I'm sure that differs between like a show that was just starting, like Gossip Girl, or one that you go into a few seasons in, you know, a few seasons in, you know what's happened on the show and you can have ideas going forward. For me though, what that entailed was that I knew I hadn't actually even read the pilot by the first day of the writer's room. It hadn't been released to us yet, but I knew what the storyline was from talking with the showrunner. And so I actually just read some books on some stuff that I can't talk about because we're not getting in trouble. But like I read some books on something that I knew was going to come up that I didn't have personal experience with, so that I could have some ideas of things to talk about, you know, and it came out to be very useful.
Reading books and just sort of like thinking outside of your show a little bit will inspire the most incredible stuff. Like I'm a huge fan of research, especially on a show like Outlander, which mostly takes place in the 1700s.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question. Calder Holbrook is asking, in your writing process, what is the difference you see between the time to push through a block and the time to rest your mind?
Ugh. It's all block. So for me personally, I mean, my goal is usually to try to write, and by write, it doesn't even necessarily mean like writing. It means like being focused on it. My goal is just 4 times a week for 1 hour. Now, that sounds like nothing. And normally I end up doing much more, but if I think of my goal is like 5 hours a day, like 7 days a week, I will just do 0 because it's like too much for me. Someone told me that, like, a showrunner friend of mine was like, I write 10 pages a day. I was like, okay, well, I feel like a loser, but I also have a like support job, so I can't do that, you know? So I think that's a personal thing, but I try to set a goal and accomplish it. And if I get more than that, then like fantastic. But if I don't get more than that, I am totally fine and will like give myself a cookie for that.
Do you have any tools though that you use to sort of get through a block? Do you step away from it? Do you go read something, watch something, and then keep thinking about it, or?
Yeah, having a dog is perfect for that, you know, so that like I'm forced to move around, go outside, not look at my phone, you know, like not be on social media, whatever. Because they always say like the creative ideas really happen when you're not thinking about them, you know, that like you're just like, oh, look at that beautiful tree. And then you're like, oh, a tree, perfect, you know, and like it makes something occur in your mind, you know.
Shaina, what about you? Do you push through the blocks or do you rest?
Well, it depends on the deadline that I'm up against. Sometimes if I have time, I will absolutely, I'm a big fan of naps. I think a nap can be the most inspiring writer's block cure. It's insane, but I'm a big dreamer. So maybe like, I love the dreams. So,
but you never get to nap now because you have a baby and a toddler.
Exactly. I've got a newborn at home. So if I'm not making sense, it's because I'm in full mommy brain right now. So naps are top of mind. But the other thing that I find that always is sort of my go-to, and I think I just said this, is research. So like if I'm writing a scene and I'm hitting a block or I'm just not feeling it, I will go and research, or I'll watch a TED talk with some kind of related subject, or I'll read a book in that area just to sort of get the language there, or just sort of find some inspiration somewhere else. Because a lot of times for me, writer's block has always been about loss of inspiration. And so it may just be taking a walk and looking at stuff and being like meditating. I'm a big fan of meditation, all of those things, just to sort of like recenter yourself and then go back to it. And you can't force it. I mean, even when you're under a deadline, I've been in, you know, I've had to turn a script around in one day, an entire script. Wow. And you're basically sitting there changing things as fast as you can. And so that sometimes when you're just sort of up against a deadline, deadlines really help me with writer's block, actually, because a deadline, there's nothing like it to sort of get you motivated to push through, but you still hit blocks and you have to sort of just keep moving forward somehow. And Elaine's right. Walking your dog is a huge thing. It's so awesome.
Tamer Ferris, are you on?
Yes, I wanted to ask for someone who's writing a new TV show for a newcomer, and I'm, let's say, trying to write a mini-series, a limited series. Would you recommend, like, for someone who has the opportunity to pitch it to a producer or something like that, to shoot a teaser or something? Or how would you go about it in today's industry?
Are you asking how you would find the person other than someone, the person that you know? How do you find people to pitch to?
Exactly.
So in terms of finding someone to pitch to, I mean, like, to me, that's the hardest thing if you don't have a rep or you're new. Particularly what I've been told, because I had a mini-series thing that I wanted to pitch also, that mini-series are especially hard if you're new, because they're a lot of money for something that won't necessarily last in terms of like set and production stuff. So just a warning to you as like a newer writer trying to pitch a limited series. But otherwise, like, generally what you do is you try, and Shaina might have much more to say on this because she's been a writer for longer than I have, but you would find a producer or production company or someone who's interested in your idea, and they help you develop the pitch, and then they will help set it up, set up meetings to pitch at the various studios or in the networks and stuff like that. But it's pretty hard to do it as a new writer unless you have a high-powered producer or someone kind of guiding, shepherding you. At least that's been my experience so far.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. I feel like for me, most of my career, any of the pitches I've done, they've always been set up through my agent or my manager. And sometimes you can get that sort of general with a producer to get to know them a little bit first before you're trying to pitch them an idea. But it's always been about my reps for that sort of thing.
Hi, Bobby.
When you have a script and you find that it's kind of at its best point, what do you think is like your personal kind of litmus test for if it can go any farther, or if you need to even take it back, or like, do you bring outside sources in, or do you just sit on it for a couple days?
I definitely sit on it for a couple of days after I get to that place, and then I go back and look at it. But the other thing I do is I sort of have a brain trust of friends that I really trust. Luckily now I have quite a few writers in that brain trust, but I also just have people who different areas of whatever that script is about that might really add some authenticity to it. I would let those people read it and then hear their notes and take them seriously. Sometimes people, especially if they're not writers, will give you notes and you're sort of like, well, they don't even know what they're talking about. But a lot of times their notes or their questions that they have will really let you know what's not getting across the same way that it wouldn't get across to an audience. So I would definitely pick very selective people and who you want to read it, and then like really listen to their notes and try not to take them personally, but try to figure out how they can better your script. And then, I don't know, for me, I've always sort of been rewrite. And then there's usually a point where I just sort of instinctually go, okay, I feel really good about this. I think this is ready. There's a moment. I mean, there's always more rewrites to do. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
You're never going to be like, this is perfect, but you definitely know when it's ready for a read.
Okay.
100% echo that. And I'll add that in addition to that like trusted group that I'll ask to read and give me notes, I will also, once I feel it's ready, I might ask like one of my bigwig friends, like someone that I'm like, I'm scared to show you this, but I think it's the best it can be. And you can't do that too early on, because otherwise they're like, stop wasting my time, this is shit, So you have to do it when you feel it's ready. And then the other thing that I mentioned when I, kind of told of my pathway, once I think something's ready, I'll also submit it to various contests just to see how it stacks up, because that to me is at least a test of like, granted, I don't know who the readers are, but that's similar to being, sending it out to anyone else in the industry. I don't know who the readers are. And so if I can place in a contest, then I feel like I know, okay, this is pretty good,
William Harton wrote a question. And this, I think you can talk both about age, race, gender. are there opportunities for, he puts in quotes, old writers in what is considered a young person's world? And I would just open that up to, you know, women, all ethnicities. Like, what are your guys' thoughts on that in the current landscape?
I think things are changing for the better in that respect of being more open to different types of people. You know, I mentioned that I had been an actor for many years, and part of why I was creatively unsatisfied was that I played a lot of nurses and receptionists as a young Asian woman, you know, and I was just sick of it. And so that's why I started writing. And I feel, at least because I just became a writer recently, my experience has been like, we love having a diverse room. Like, I can't believe we haven't been doing this, you know? So obviously I'm on the younger range, but I will say that my room, at least for Gossip Girl, was diverse in range of age. And although I will say that it tended to be the younger people were the newer people and the older people were the more established people. So I don't know if that is a hard thing, but I do feel, at least in the conversations that I've had with other writers and the articles that I've read and like the different programs and stuff like that, that people are much more open to diversity in age as well. So that's all I know, at least from my perspective.
I would probably second most of what you said. In my experience, I've definitely, as far as like gender goes, I remember when I first started out, it was like, oh, who's going to be the girl in the room? And you were sort of up against all the other girls for that one position in the room. Now, you know, I don't even think about gender. I mean, I'm sure there are other people thinking about it, but I'm not thinking about it. And I'm just sort of going about my business, because you can't really control any of that anyway. But you still do hear, oh, we need an upper level female, or we need, you know, a diverse whatever. Like, and so those things are absolutely happening, because they are trying to create more diverse rooms. So there's now even more like, okay, do we have everybody sort of accounted for? I will say, kind of going back to what I said earlier, I worked on a show once where there was a guy who was an older writer who had a full career before, and he was a staff writer, but he was coming over and he was an ex-cop. And so he had already had this really incredible established career. And that show, we had a cop on that show. And so he brought expertise to that. So depending on that, going back to that life experience, I think age can be really powerful if that comes with some sort of experience that you're bringing to the table, and people and staff writers happen on that level for expertise. I see that happening more likely than sort of like the traditional route where you start off as like the assistant, kind of moving your way up. If you're doing a second career, often I see it coming from some level of expertise being, you know, segued into a new career. But yeah, everybody seems to be more open to everything.
Will you guys just explain sort of the hierarchy in the room of like break down, you know, your showrunner, executive producer, and kind of what they do all the way down to where you start as a staff writer or assistant? Or
I remember when I first got a job, I went to the Writers Guild website and was like, what does each position mean? What are my responsibilities in that position? And there's kind of a loose breakdown at the Writers Guild website, but it just depends on the show. The first show I was on, they were like, there's no hierarchy here. Everyone is the same level. Everyone deserves the same time. On another show, it's like only the upper levels pitch to the showrunner. On other shows, you had to sort of like, it had to be your episode to be pitching. But as far as the different levels go, like staff writer, story editor, executive story editor, those are sort of like the beginning stages. So those sort of tend to be a certain amount of responsibilities. And then once you get into like writer producer credits, then you start to be producing a little bit more, depending on the show. Some shows you'll be a writer producer, but you're not expected to really produce anything. You're just really supposed to be maybe doing some, like as you get into upper levels, you may do notes on scripts, or you may be asked to handle like a rewrite here and there when somebody else can't. And that tends to be the big differences. Now on Outlander, we're a producer heavy show because our writer producers actually go to Scotland for 3 months. So we oversee all of prep, 5 weeks of prep, and then 5 weeks of shooting. And so it's very, when I first started on Outlander, they didn't even have lower level writers because they needed everyone to be a producer because you're going to be thrown into the field. And in Scotland, you'll be out in the middle of some place in Scotland where you don't have reception. So you have to sort of know what you're doing. Because I know when you're writing on something in LA or even North Carolina, if you have a question, you can kind of run off into the side and, you know, call your showrunner, or you can call another colleague and say, hey, this is what's happening. And can I change this line? Does this line going to work? But in Scotland, you're on your own so often because you simply just can't get reception or the time change. And so you were definitely producing a lot more on that show. But on, say, Guilt, for instance, the showrunners actually went to London. We shot that in London. So they were in London producing, but none of the writers actually went over there. So our producing, we had to do some producing, like casting and stuff like that. But it was, all of those positions are so drastically different on every show I've been on. And so it really has, I would say the main thing that happens is just sort of like how many levels of experience you have. And each show will say, hey, we need actual writers who have hard producing experience or post experience or this kind of thing. But it's really always about the writing.
Let's get Rachel Jacob on here. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, from New Orleans. Thank you for doing this. Okay, so my question has to do with rewrites. It is something that I struggle with big time. How do you deal with rewrite situations? Do you find that they are energy sucking since you've already been through the emotions and or the experience of writing something all the way through? Or, what's the experience like of having to keep revisiting the same story over and over, a certain point over and over again? Or, yeah.
It really depends. I think it probably depends on like, why am I rewriting and for who and what's my attitude towards it, right? So like, if I have to rewrite for the job that I got, like, I'm happy to do it. It doesn't bother me. I because I was an actor for so long, I feel like I don't even have feelings anymore. Like, I don't take things personally. I've been rejected so many times and like in the worst ways, So for someone to give me notes on my writing, I'm like, cool, I'll do it. Like, obviously, like, yeah, do some people give stupid notes? Maybe, but Shaina mentioned this earlier, that you try to find out like, well, what's really the intention behind the note? Like, maybe I don't agree with this exact note, but there's something there, and especially if enough people say it. So I don't mind rewriting, but there is a point where I'm like, I'm done, and I don't really care who else tells me what to do, especially if it's my own writing, right? Like, I'm not getting paid for it. I'm writing on my own. I'm just trying to make it the best that I can. Like, at some point, you have to say that you're done. I've done several things where I've written full scripts, send them to people, got notes, whatever, and then I have excuse me, I have a little cough. I have someone who is very trusted tell me like, I really just don't even think this works in the way that it is, and you should start from the beginning. And that is like bone crushing, but it's what happened with Schooling the Rich, which was the pilot that like really helped me get out there. And so sometimes you have to admit defeat and just be like, oh shit, I have to start. Sorry, I swore, but like, I have to start from the beginning, and only you can know in your heart if that's actually the right note or not. It's tough. Like, but when I got, I just did it with another pilot. Like, you would think I would learn, but I'm someone like, writing is fun for me. I like to write, but what isn't fun for me is the planning and the character development and like the story development and all the important parts of writing. And so a friend of mine who's a showrunner sat me down and was like, Elaine, writing is the reward. Like, you have to do all this work to get there, because he asked to see one of my outlines, and I brought it over, and he goes, I don't even need to read it to know it's not enough, because I was like, here's like 3 pages of, it was just like loose paragraphs and bullet points, and he was like, this is not an outline. This is not like how a professional would do it. And he shared with me his outline for his own show, and I could, like, no one had ever done that for me before, so I didn't even know what I was missing. And so when I learned about preparation better, that's when I didn't have as much rewriting and like hair pulling to do. So that would be my advice. Like, if you find yourself rewriting a lot and you're not enjoying it, like, maybe you need to change your process. I don't know, that might help. That's what helped me.
I would definitely second all of that. And as far as rewriting, it's been I have a love-hate relationship with it, because there are times when it is soul crushing, and there are times when it is so exciting. It's sort of like you want some idea you had, someone gives you a note, and then all of a sudden you see this whole different pathway open up, and it just sort of gets you re-inspired. Like sometimes I'll have a script that I think is finished, and someone will ask a question, and I'll get so excited about how to just make it even more layered or more complex in a great way. There's definitely been moments where I have a script that I'm really excited about, and then for production reasons, something changes and the script gets totally, a thread gets pulled, and next thing you know, I'm rewriting from scratch on a script that I was in love with. And that is so painful, and it's so hard because I don't know, I've always found when that first moment when you're putting all the pieces together, it's this fresh, like blue sky situation. And then when you're trying to fix things, sometimes it can just get convoluted. But I think the key is, if you have those moments where you're really annoyed or mad, like process that feeling and go through it. Like same thing, go for a walk, meditate, do whatever it is, process that, and then go back to those notes. Like often I've been given notes where my first instinct is like, oh, what? No, they don't get it. They didn't see it. Or I failed. I didn't tell the story I wanted to tell. And then I'll go take a walk, and then I'll come back to that note, and I'll look at it totally differently. And it'll be so simple and not nearly as cruel as I thought it was, and not nearly as hard to fix or to implement. And so for me, I often find if I can get the notes, especially if there's a lot, and then take some time to process them and then come back to them, I see them totally differently. My first instinct is always like, what? Wait, hold on. And then it really sort of processes differently.
Stephen Nolly, you're on.
Hi, yeah, my question is, I guess primarily for Elaine. So as a new writer and also as a person of color, how do you approach bringing up issues in storyline or production which are not culturally sensitive? And how do you do that in a way that retains your integrity and also doesn't make you the troublemaker in the room for bringing up something to a room full of non-diverse people?
Oh man, that is a great question. And Stephen, I recognize your name. I think we're Facebook friends, maybe.
Yes, we are Facebook friends.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
And also shout out to, I recognize a lot of other people in here, and I just want to say hi. So for that, I only have the one experience so far in the room, and thankfully it was a joy, and it was easy to say like, hey, this is something that you should think about, from an Asian perspective, or like, as a woman, I would never blah, 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 or whatever. So far it's been received very well and was asked for. With other experiences, I don't really want to name who or when, how it all came about, but I wrote something that people were interested in, and it's like, well, do you really want to, like, this? So it's such a strange conversation, but it was a white woman saying, I think you talk about race like a little too on the nose, and that scares people. And I was like, well, I didn't say this to her because she was in a position of power, and I'm still trying to figure out how to do this. But I was like, does it scare people or does it scare you? You know what I mean? And so, and it's important to me to have this conversation. Like, it's part of my writing. It's what I do is address race and gender and whatever in my writing, because it's something that's important to me. I try to do it from a way that, like, you can't like bang someone on the head and be like, don't be racist. Like, then they're like, leave me alone. But if you can like put it in a story in some way, so it's still something that I'm figuring out, because also, like, as a new person, like say, you don't want to step on anyone's toes and like tell them that they're wrong, but at the same time, like, you do feel a responsibility to do so, but then you get mad because you're like, why is it my responsibility? I don't know. I have a lot of mixed emotions about this, and I guess all I can say is that, like I said at the beginning, I think it's getting better about people being like open and receptive and realizing that, like, if they are in a position of privilege, that it is their responsibility to try to make the change, because we need allies. And I've seen that attitude more and more and more. And so, because most of what I've encountered is not from a place of like actual racism or prejudice prejudicial thinking so much as maybe just like not realizing or like not being aware. And when I encounter that, that's a little bit easier to deal with, so I don't have a perfect answer for this though. It's still hard.
That was a good answer though. Thank you. Dan?
Hello, and thank you for taking my question last. I'll try to bring it home. So my question is about fan expectations. As writers who are creating your own stories, but also blending your voices into the stories of a show, that's a certain talent and that's a certain discipline in and of itself. But also you have the outer world, the fans of the show, in the case of Outlander, the books, and they are looking to you as the creators of the series to maintain certain consistencies, to have certain moments, key moments that you mentioned in Outlander, portrayed on screen in a way they feel is authentic to their experience as fans. Mm-hmm. How do you guys juggle those conversations in the writer's room, and what kind of leadership have you seen from showrunners on how to kind of both manage that and also somehow just honor that, I guess?
I can also speak to the Outlander of it. These books have a huge fan base already, and many of the writers in the room are huge fans of the books as well. And so we come in the room already loving the books and we all of us will have a different experience with the book. And so we'll talk about a scene that we all know needs to happen because it's such a great moment in the book. And we will all have different perspectives of how that happened. And so the fans are all going to come to the table. When you read a book, you're visualizing it in whatever way you're going to see it, So I think it's about respecting the overall story, and we all will debate in the room what we really think that meant or how it felt or how it best serves. Because on our show, for instance, the book stories and then the television stories sometimes change, because if we can't fit a certain story into the television series, then maybe that didn't happen to that character. So that character isn't exactly the same as they are in the book, 6 books in. And so there's all kinds of little adjustments that would ultimately, if you're looking for the book character at season 5 or 6, but the television character has gone through different experiences, it's going to be altered just a little bit. So I think what's key when it comes to that is respecting the fans, because they're a great resource. They're a great resource they also love the books and have their interpretations and their passion for it. And so ultimately we're all working for an audience medium, but you can't let that overwhelm you, because that'll just paralyze you. And so you have to sort of listen to it all, pay attention to what, like in the writer's room, we all listen to each other and really hear the different perspectives of the scenes. And then when you're sitting in your house and you're writing the script, you have to trust your own instincts by that point. So it's really absorbing everything that you can from everyone. And then when you sit in that moment, you have to trust your own instincts. And hopefully you're going to end up respecting, the truth is you're going to make some people happy and some people mad, because when you read a book, you just see it differently. But it's great when you already love the material you're working with.
For Gossip Girl, I was a huge fan of the original show. And when I got the job offer, I was like, oh my God, I was so excited. And then I was like, oh my God, like I feel this pressure, because as a fan, like I want it to be good. And like now I'm one of those people making it. Like it blows my mind even that like happened. And so I will tell you that when I read the pilot of this new version of Gossip Girl, I was like, this is really good. I got really excited. And so I hope the fans feel that way. Like we haven't premiered yet. Well, like we're not even into production because everything got shut down. And so, I don't know. It's funny. I've been on Instagram, and there's now an official Gossip Girl Instagram account, and just like watching people, they've posted maybe 3 pictures so far. And like one of the pictures was of sneakers, like shoes. And people are like, oh my God, if this is what they're doing, it's wrong. Like the shoes are wrong. And so who knows, but then equally there were some people who are like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm glad it's getting updated or whatever, So I don't know. This will be an interesting journey for me too. Like I'm waiting to get like dragged on social media, but I also hope like the other thing happens where people are just excited and that the show is back. And I mean, I like it, so I hope that other fans will like it too. If it's okay, Shaina from ISA, before we end, I saw a message that Jim is here from Creative Screenwriting magazine, and I wrote an article about like my first being in the writer's room and what I learned and stuff like that. And he said that it's coming out next week. So I just wanted to plug that if anyone wants like further details on my experience, that's going to be coming out soon.
Shaina, do you have any final words that you want to say?
I would say that when it comes to writing your own material, just write what you want to do, because it's fun, but it's also can be torturous. Like, you're going to have ups and downs. So if it's a story that you're in love with and you believe in, that'll get you through it. I've had agents before tell me, oh, that's not right for the industry right now. And then it turns out that the industry blows up. Like, I had a grim fairy tale thing when all of that was happening, and my agents were like, grim fairy tales, who's going to do that? But when it's the times when I've really trusted my instincts and just been like, you know what, forget about all of you. I'm just going to write what I want to write. I'm alone in my house with my computer. Leave me alone. That's the material that ends up getting me jobs. It's always that material that my agents are like, wait, what? I'm like, just trust me, because I feel so passionate about it.
We have some upcoming events in the next couple weeks. On April 8th, we're doing a follow-up tutorial with Jim Hart for the Hart Chart. On Wednesday, April 15th, meditative writing class with Jess Hines. Next Thursday, our third Thursdays, we're going to have writers Dave Wapple and Sam Thompson on to talk about their process and journey. And on Wednesday, April 22nd, we have a webinar, ISA Connect in the Business, Planning, Marketing, Resources for Your Screenwriting Career. So go to our events page on www.networkisa.org and check all of those out and register.